Dear student, let us start the today's discussion, that is 20th April 2016 newspaper. The first article is related to the Brazilian crisis. Now we all know that in the yesterday's newspaper, the Brazil president is subjected to the impeachment. The major accusation against her is she did not reflect the Brazilian deficit properly. So in this context, the lower house, that is the Congress, has passed the resolution with two-third majority, and it goes to the upper house, that is the Senate. It will get the matters investigated, and if it also passes that with two-third majority, then the president stands impeached. Why such a situation has come up in Brazil? Now, there is an out of proportion accusation on the president, and none of these charges are been proven till date, and inquiry is still going on. So in this context, it is seen as a part of the greater power struggle which is going on in the case of the Latin America. So we popularly call it as receding of the pink tide, where the leftist governments elected in the last decade, they are slowly losing the power in the Latin America. Either it is Brazil, Bolivia, or it is or Venezuela. Everywhere the leftist governments, they are losing the power. So one of the major reasons is global economic scenario. Most of these governments, they have initiated the welfare measures based on the wealth due to the commodity prices. As the commodity prices fallen, they don't have other choice but to cut down on this welfare, and it has made these governments highly unpopular, and added to that the corruption charges made the situations much worse. Now coming to the next article, it is related to the apology and forgiveness. We all know about the Komgata incident. A ship which is rented from Hong Kong has ferried the majorly sick population to the British Columbia shores in Canada. But as per the Canadian immigration laws, any ship, if it do not come directly from the country where the people are belonging to, then they are not allowed to immigrate into the country. So in this context, they turned the ship back, and when it has reached the Kolkata port, a firing was held, and it led to the death of 19 people. So in this context, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Trudeau, he has offered an apology, right, which will be rendered in the lower house in the month of the May. So in this context, what the apology plays a role? So apology has a distinct virtue according to the author. Apology, it provides for a sense of reconciliation with the past for the victims of that particular thing. Whenever, if you observe in the history, post Second World War situation, West Germany's Chancellor, Mr. Brandt, went to the Warsaw, where a ghetto was there, and he has apologized unconditionally to the Jews. So it means it's a kind of rectifying the past injustices which are done by the authority to a section of population. And also, it gives utmost comfort to the human value. So these are the virtues of an apology and forgiveness the Shiv Vishwanathan talks about. So in India, there are also many incidences where people can apologize. For example, Gujarat riots, and added to that anti-Sikh riots. All these are a situation like this in this category. Now coming to the internet governance, there are two versions over here. One is Internet Protocol version 4, next is Internet Protocol version 6. What is IPv4? Now, under this, generally it is to communicate between the computers over a network. So in this context, almost 4 billion names and numbers were possible under IPv4, and it is believed that they are about to get extinguished. So we have to broaden these numbers. For that, a new version has come up, which is called as IPv6. So under the IPv6, the Internet Protocol 6, which is also called as Next Generation Protocol or Next Generation Internet Standard, under this, what will happen is the number of available names and domains will increase many-fold. This is the simplistic understanding. But between the transfer, that is from IPv4 to IPv6, both of them coexist for a while. Under IPv4, the root, internet root, it is located in the United States of America. Under IPv6, the internet route is also expected to be shifted towards the developing countries. For this, there is a project which is working that is called EAT, YETIAT. And the next, coming to the United States, the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015 and some analysis of this. Now this article is squarely fits into the intellectual property rights. Now US always accuses India of poor intellectual property enforcement and poor intellectual property laws in the country. In this context, let's analyze this. When this act has come into existence, what it is going to do and what is the existing situation. As of now, US Trade Representative under Special 301 rules, he can classify the countries into three categories: priority foreign countries, priority watch list, and watch list. So this classification is based on to what extent intellectual property right regime exists in these countries and to what extent in the United States the intellectual properties are respected and under the Special 301. Now, most of the times India is placed on PWL category. So, it means that India has no proper enforcement of the intellectual property rights and it can damage the business interests or trade interests of the United States of America. Now, as per the new law, so United States Trade Representative, he will be releasing the new benchmarks a country has to follow to conduct the trade with United States. Within 1 year, if these new benchmarks, that is either the laws or institutional mechanisms, are not followed, US can restrict its state trade engagement or can impose the trade sanctions on that particular country. It means it has definitely has direct impact on the India's trade with United States of America. So this is why this law is important. And coming to the RBI governor, now if you see recently RBI is intervening in the forex markets to buy the currency because the excessive flow of the foreign capital will appreciate the rupee and it will worsen the Indian export growth. So that's why as the systems or markets are not fully developed in India, the capital controls are very much necessary so that the forex market cannot be totally subjected to the market rules. So the soundness of the trade and investment, the trade in goods and services will guide our RBI interventions. That is what is being stressed by the Raghuram Rajan. Now, coming to the Uttarakhand Row, here we need to study something about Article 356. Whenever the President's rule is imposed, it has to be approved by the Parliament within 2 months. And the Supreme Court in S.R. Bommai case has clearly stated that the floor of the Assembly is only the legitimate place to prove the confidence of the government of the day. But though 28th March is the test, a floor test for the Uttarakhand government, on March 27th the President's rule was imposed. So in this context, what the Uttarakhand High Court questioned is what was such an urgency. An unnecessary center's intervention has created the chaos in the case of the Uttarakhand. So what Attorney General argued is this: the imposition of Article 356 is a temporary pause. Within 2 months, if the Parliament do not pass, that the government will be reinstated. So it will not create much damage. But however, the lack of the floor test is actively questioned by the Uttarakhand High Court over here. And coming to the prohibition, already we have discussed enough over this. So the prohibition can help regulating the indebtedness, domestic violence, and also health conditions of the poor. But however, the prohibition it forms the major chunk of the state revenues. So whenever the prohibition was imposed, most of the times it was not implemented properly. So in this context, the states have to have a foolproof plan for the implementation of the prohibition and also the substitution of the finances it is losing, which are mostly spent on a set of welfare programs. So without this, if haphazardly the prohibition is implemented, it is bound to come back in one or the other form. And added to that, whenever the prohibition is high, the illicit liquor growth was also high. So the government has to take enough steps to control this illicit liquor. And let's come to the Indian Express newspaper today. Now, Maritime Summit was held in Mumbai, and port-led development was stressed by the Prime Minister Modi. So in this, the targets are the total port handling capacity will be made from existing 1400 million tons to the 3000 million tons by 2025. An expected 1 lakh crore of investments are expected in this sector. So in this case, if this have to be realized, what has to be done is the major question. And what the government did till date are the things we need to understand. Now, if you care, let us see carefully over here. The Sagarmala project, it is the prime project over here. There are 4 important components on the Sagarmala project. One is port modernization. Under this, 6 new mega ports are being developed. So try to take that mega port locations. It can be a question for our prelims. And the next is connectivity. So with regard to connectivity, 83 projects and 10,000 kilometers of new connectivity infrastructure is being developed, and $30 billion is being spent on this. The port-led industrialization, there are 27 industrial clusters are being suggested. The coastal community development, so these are the various things which are being part of this project. So in this context, what are the government actions till date? You all know that the Ministry of Shipping has given a comprehensive plan and a comprehensive perspective plan for this. And also a connectivity is planned between the port and the hinterlands. Road, rail and water connectivity. Under water connectivity, inland waterways are being developed. Under the rail connectivity, under Ministry of Shipping itself, Indian Port Rail Corporation is being developed, established. Indian Port Rail Corporation, and 100% of FDI is allowed in the port sector, and a 10 years tax holiday is been given. But still certain challenges were there. The fund cost is very high. The reluctance of the banks to provide for the funds to the infrastructure. And along with this, the major ports, there is a tariff authority which is regulating the tariffs. If investments has to flow, the freedom to determine the tariffs is an important factor. So the tariff authority need to be removed. And obviously for such a mega infrastructure projects, environmental and pollution bottlenecks, clearances are the major challenge. So if we can overcome these, so we can see a new path of development through the modernization of Indian ports. And the next issue is related to the urban development in India and the challenges with the urban governance is facing. The first major challenge is related to the finances. So any power or finances which has to be transferred to the urban local bodies, it is purely in the hands of the state governments. And few days back we have seen the Shanghai model of housing development. Even in India, housing for all scheme is launched. But however, none of the authority exists in the hands of the local bodies. If you carefully observe, urban planning is an important subject in the 12th schedule that has to be transferred to the urban local bodies. The programs such as Januram, now present Amrut, the Smart Cities Mission, all these are reform-linked programs. It means the finances will be transferred to the urban local bodies when certain reforms are undertaken, especially related to the capacities of planning. But most of the cases under Januram, it can be seen as a failure. So, even if you talk about the State Finance Commission, it is being established by the state government and it is not as professional as the Finance Commission of India. So, in these circumstances, giving greater funds and autonomy to the local governments is the need of the hour, and it need to be provided through a constitutional route. It means that certain functions of the local bodies have to be clearly delineated under the constitution, and also the revenue flow has to be provided, or else the taxes which can be collected by the local governments can be provided under the same provisions itself. As of now, the property tax is the major source of income, but however, the state governments determine the tax rate. So, in most of the cases, not all the amount is collected properly. So, this is about management of the urban local bodies. Let us see the articles again. Now, important events around the world, the Brazil crisis. Dilma Rousseff's impeachment motion is passed in the lower house. Now, forgiving, it is a virtue, a value in the human belief. Internet governance, IPv6, and the internet routes are being developed in various developing countries. This project is called AT. And murder of the Bangladeshi bloggers, what it shows is the growth of the non-progressive elements in the Bangladesh society, and arrest of these perpetrators of the violence will show the resilience of the government towards its secularism and secular values. And coming to the populism as prohibition, the governments have to carefully implement the prohibition. If ad hoc measures or populistic measures are being taken up to garner the votes, it's going to be short-lived. Rajiv Gandhi killers, the Supreme Court already has given its stand that the state governments cannot release the prisoners who are convicted under the union laws, who are investigated and prosecuted through CBI. And the next is the RBI Forex intervention. So in India, the forex management still needs an RBI control because the institutions, market regulating institutions, are not completely developed. And currency appreciation just through the capital flows will do damage in the long run. And RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the China and other countries, they started accusing India as a roadblock towards the negotiations. And the Trade Facilitation Act, with regard to the foreign trade, America has passed a new law, and it can have long-term consequences to the intellectual property rights. In this, what is Special 301? Try to understand. Uttarakhand crisis, the President's rule, Article 356, where the President's rule, if it is imposed by the center, it has to be approved by the Parliament within 2 months. Till then, the Assembly will be in suspended animation. And Indian Express, water resources of India with regard to water conservation. Understand this point very clearly that water conservation needs a water governance plan under which the canal irrigation water has to be, shall not be given for free, and the free power is also depleting the groundwater. So the Maharashtra government has recently has kept a moratorium on giving new permissions to the sugar mills to discourage the sugarcane cultivation. It is more of a knee-jerk reaction rather than that. The government could have collected the user fee from the canal irrigation, which would have discouraged the people from water intensive crops or encouraged them towards the water conservation methods such as drip irrigation. And security issues with regard to terrorism, the China and its technical hold will not do much difference to the India's fight against terrorism. The major way out for India is to build its counter-terror capabilities and developing the alliances with the like-minded countries. The setting cities free, the urban local finances and governance is still under the state control. Unless the freedom and autonomy is given, the major infrastructure projects, private investment flows cannot happen into the urban governance. And the ports, the Sagarmala project is based on 4 principles. These are related to the port especially the port modernization, connectivity, port-led industrialization, coastal community developmental fund. And finally, the challenges which we have seen over here. Thank you very much. All the best.